Welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show. At the heart of our discussion today is coffee, a very important part of the story of the nation state, Uganda, in which, of course, we are all trying to play a part in building our collective destiny. This is a crop that over the years has been political and social, but also economic, with many attributing their past, their education, their whole livelihood, their families to this crop. Today we find ourselves yet in another debate for the second time this year, caught up in a discussion around coffee amendment bill that is slated to the guillotine of rationalization to be added back to the ministry as a department. It is a subject of contention. Indeed, there have been several sides. We have heard from the members of parliament who at first unanimously opposed it earlier this year, but we seem to be seeing some coordinated or uncoordinated movements left or right. We saw a lot of sentiments last week, tribal undertones in parliament, and indeed right now, as the House is adjourned until 5th November, there's a break for us to make sense of what all this means. And of course, with me are our panelists, who will be helping us and guiding our thought processes around this topic. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and just for introductions, I'll start with Mr. Othieno Joseph, who is a UPC ideologue and a media personality. You're most welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Sad that we're discussing the thing that helped us gain our independence. Sad that this very particular item called coffee together with cotton were part of the early grievances way back in the 40s before my father and others were in tune, talking their prices, talking about their rights, talking about these things. Those are the things that woke up these guys. Those are the things that led us to independence. But after 60 years, we are here discussing the mathematics of 1 + 1, and we don't know what it adds to.
It's the algebra.
Yes. we shall get into the cumulatives of whether we are moving forward or backwards as we go along the way. Very honored today to have Honorable Salaamu Musumba.
The Right Honorable.
Right Honorable, who is also the Forum for Democratic Change Vice Chairperson for Eastern Uganda. You're most welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Glad to be here and to see my brother Simon after a long time. He looks so much like me these days. Good to see you, Simon. And hello, all of you out there watching us. Thank you for tuning in all the time. I feel like I'm in your faces every time. But yes, here I am again.
Yes.
Fantastic to have you always around us. We really appreciate it. Yes.
Amazing. And of course, to enchant the show today, we also have Ambassador Simon Mulongo, who, of course, is a seasoned diplomat, former special envoy, a former member of parliament, and foundationally to the country, a former member of the Constituent Assembly. You're most welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really happy to have a very rare opportunity to meet my very good sister, the Right Honorable Salaamu Musumba, and my brother Othieno, who we are talking tough things when he was in London, and we're happy that we're back here on the soil. And for Dr. Bireete, whom we also exchange serious issues. And of course, talking about the industry, which UPC never established UCDA, but they want to talk about priding themselves for UCDA. So I think this is a very important moment where the truth must come to light.
Simon.
That the NRM is talking about issues they established and issues they want to realign. But for UPC, won't talk about things they never established, but which they don't want to realign. So we will see how it goes.
All right.
Yes,
But is our guest aware that if you give birth to a child and kill the child, you are charged with murder and convicted?
Yes, I'm very well aware that a child can be groomed into a man. For example, if in Bugishu you're not a man, we circumcise you and become a man. I am aware of that.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I'm sure in rebuttal, UPC will adduce the very colorful plot in Bugolobi.
Amen.
I think also important to note is Ambassador is a member.
Factory. Realigned.
I think important to note is Ambassador is also a member of the National Resistance Movement, of course.
And is complaining that I took over the seat where Comrade Witch normally takes as a flag. But I was just trying to play neutral.
but also to know that these colors, NRM is broad-based. And
Thank
so
you very much.
most of the parties have selected colors from us.
Yes.
So if I can resemble any of the other colors,
Yes.
it simply means we're the parent colors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you very much. And of
What
course,
don't you have?
we have Dr. Bireete Sarah, who is the Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. You're most welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers and listeners.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'd like to start with you, Doctor. We have spent several shows here discussing government expenditure, you know, and how government can better serve its people, saving costs, the cost of corruption, 10 trillion. And yet now we see, you know, a move towards rationalization of coffee to save the country perhaps from what is called duplication. And this is where several voices of dissent like you come and draw the line once again. Isn't it a situation where the government is between a rock and a hard place? They are damned if they do, damned if they don't, with rationalization. Yes.
Well, first of all, this government is facing a crisis of trust and confidence from the people. So whether they do good or mean good, it highly trickles down to the minds of the people. But also on the issue of a bloated government structure that consumes about 30% of our budget. You have you know, a cabinet size that is almost the biggest in Africa. It's 81 ministers. If you search African countries, the largest, the biggest economies like South Africa, Nigeria, they don't. Like, it's laughable to have a cabinet of 81 ministers. However, some big the countries, even India doesn't have. Our parliament is almost as big as India, and I think there are two biggest parliaments, Pakistan and one another forgotten, to the size of Uganda. The others, their GDP is more than 10 times or even 100 times the size of Uganda. You have presidential advisors. The last time I checked, we had reached 130 presidential advisors. And most of them, when interviewed by media, they all say they've never met the president to advise him. They don't even know their terms of reference. You have RDCs with the cities now, all new cities and all the cities have up to 3 RDCs. You have an RDC, deputy RDC, and assistant RDC. I don't even know their terms of reference, if they have any. You have Kampala has about 5 RDCs as the big city. You have districts. Some of them very unviable. They don't even have structures. We don't have a criteria for creation of new districts. What's the size of the people? What's the size of income in that district? What economic activity? Because these should be the defining factors for creation of an additional administrative unit. Are you serving a larger population? Are you trying to manage a bigger income? Is there bigger economic activity that you need to manage? Nothing. We just give districts like birthday gifts on rallies. So you have this kind of governance by NRM, and largely because of the political patronage that they use to keep power. So this is the bloated administrative structure that Ugandans would want to do away with. When it comes to agencies, government is struggling to save about 1 trillion in this rationalization of agencies in total, 1.1 trillion. But you have an IGG report which says you lose 9.8 trillion every year. So where should you put most of your energy? Is it closing the gaps for corruption, or struggling to strangle every citizen out there to save 1 trillion?
For argument's sake, what's wrong with doing both?
If we are doing both, First to do the bigger one, then come for the where do you start? Where do you concentrate your energies as a country? When you go to UCDA, the you know, the elephant in the room, UCDA's budget is 85 billion. Both from last year up to projected 2027,
Apparently,
85 billion. Is this worth strangling a nation? What constituency does it serve 12 million coffee farmers? A minimum of 2 million households. But the house has about 8, 9 people, adults. So is it worth it? 85 billion? The president has been tweeting every day, those years. And usually when the president, you know, is worked up by an issue, then you know there is something more that meets an eye. Because he last tweeted like that during the Bireete controversy. The speed of tweeting is similar to the Bireete saga, which is also related to coffee. So what are we dealing with under coffee? In a pre-independence structure, we still had coffee as a dominant cash crop after its introduction by the colonialists. It became dominant amongst coffee, tea, cotton, and was deliberately produced, you know, promoted as a government policy for productivity. So from that time, then in the 60s, the leaders of that day saw need to systematically promote growing of coffee beyond what the colonialists had done, but also create avenues for market and controlling the supply chain. And that's how we came to have the likes of the Coffee Marketing Board for export. We had all the agricultural extension system for control of quality, help farmers even during harvest and drying processes. We had the stores at the parish level, also to make sure that the storage is controlled for high quality and transportation for export. This was a government system. From the 60s up to, even Idi Amin did not disrupt that system, because coffee remained the highest export foreign exchange earner, even under the disrupted Idi Amin regime.
And if you don't mind, in Amin's case, we were actually busy undermining Amin's administration because we're fighting him.
Yes.
And yet continued.
But still coffee. And the Simon Mulongo and group, they know how important coffee was, even in supporting the bushwa. And this could lead to the political connotations surrounding the rationalization. So even when, after privatization in the early 90s and 2000s, with the, you know, doing away with the Coffee Marketing Board, destroying cooperatives, I still remember the fight over Banyankole Kwetera in Western Uganda. The last person who had tried to save Banyankole Kwetera and Brigadier Kamwesiga, his death is still rumored to be linked to the fight of the union. So you have these fights that citizens are well alive to at all levels, regardless of whether your family plants coffee or not. If your family doesn't, your neighbor does. So every citizen can connect the coffee story in this country. So you have then the efforts by citizens due to demand and the creation of UCDA to have a unit that promotes coffee, controls quality, and tries to support farmers to maintain the good quality for export. UCDA is also connecting to the international markets after the disbanding
coffee
of
marketing.
coffee. So now today, but just before the rationalization, we had the Bireete scandal just a few months ago. Bireete scandal was an attempt to steal the best quality of coffee and monopolize it and gazette it for one exporter. Farmers pushed back. Now today here we are saying coffee must be rationalized under that disguise of reducing public cost. Why don't we start with the biggest spenders? Why do we start with the minor spenders? From Western Uganda, we are coming from a background of people uprooting tea. People are still uprooting tea. People are stuck with the tea where a kilogram costs 200 shillings. What can you do with 200 shillings in this country? You can't even buy Rolex.
The volume of a kilo of tea.
And that is under the same ministry. The death of tea growing in this country. So now we are here telling citizens that it is okay. Give us your coffee, we also kill it. And you expect citizens to watch? I don't think so.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring in Ambassador. Doctor alludes to a certain lack of trust, within government. That even when something is logically coherent, like the president tried to justify in his statement, people just don't trust. They feel like there's something going on behind. Maybe could you help guide our audience on the case for rationalization? If you support it anyway, I'm boldly assuming that.
Well,
you
thank you. I'm happy that you're not sure whether you support or not.
Yes.
And that begs the question of rational thinking.
Yes.
Where rationality means you weigh the positive and the negative and you choose what is best for you.
Yes.
One time I was a lecturer and I would mark students out of course when they don't focus on the theme of the question. The question is UCDA and rationalization. And you're talking about the hare, the lake, the fish, the birds. Such a student definitely will fail. I think let's focus on the UCDA, the coffee industry, and ensure that we score accordingly. Because it's about coffee, which is a very important industry in this country. Whether the areas that have never performed well or performed nicely, or we agree with them or not, what is our take about the coffee industry in this country? Should it be run by a government agency or the mainstream line ministry? Those are the fundamental questions that we need to respond to. And what are the principles that undergird the purpose for which the government would like to rationalize? In other words, plow it back into the mainstream line ministry other than the agency running it. So if we can answer this, I think we shall be home and dry. And let nobody come here to tell us how they're sympathetic with the creation of UCDA and other agencies and authorities, for which purpose we know very well. We've been in Parliament with my sister here. We've been all the way by there from a very long time in the CA. And we've seen this country grow and issues of the early 90s and mid 90s of privatization, democratization, liberalization, blah, 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 call it what you want, which was led by the Bretton Woods institutions, imposing on us some of these developments that we had to draw down to our throats, whether we liked it or not. Because if you tell me some of the policy mistakes we did through the 90s, mid 90s, was really running to a jump onto the so-called zessions of the Bretton institutions, that we must say democratization, we must say privatization, we must liberalization, we must, those kind of things. But we did. We did what was necessary.
Were those policy mistakes or they were?
Because yes, they were. Later on, we learned that they were mistakes. And like any serious business person, when you start running an enterprise, you carry out evaluation. These periodic evaluations enable you to understand whether you should move the same way or you actually would like to adjust for the better. And so if the government has carried out its own study or the performance of the shown is that we did adopt at the time and you would like to make adjustments, having learned lessons over time, it's only right and fitting that the government takes a decision to rationalize. Rationalization, as the word goes, is to make it better. Because some of these agencies' performance either have gone off course and they're doing things that are not necessarily beneficial to the country, or that the management style should revert to the parent ministry for purposes of ensuring proper control. And people say we fear government control, but it's the government which is in control anyway. Even these agencies, whether it is UNRWA, whether it is URA, whether it is UCDA, it's under government. These are agencies of government. And as such, government is simply saying that let's revisit this approach. But it's the same government that issues policies. It's the one which regulates these institutions. So it's the point of where do we get more benefits and maximize oversight and control as a government that has been voted into power by the people. And therefore, people should not now reach here to say that we're now acting against people. But the people give us the mandate to do everything necessary within the powers of government to ensure that things are run properly and correctly and in their interest. Because let nobody deceive that the government is acting against the interests of the people. The NRM is a people-centered organization. And whatever we do is supposed to be in the best interest of the people. The only those who are opposed to it are those who do not wish the agenda for the people to proceed smoothly.
But Ambassador, if we are sticking narrow, as you guided would be appropriate for this topic, Doctor, I think, Right Honorable chipped in that there's evidence of inadequacies in the operations of the ministry regarding other crops anyway already. So is it a case for better management in the ministry?
How are
Yes.
they faring?
Yes, the issue is the bottlenecks there are different from the rationalization of the agency because the farmers face different conditions and which conditions are and must be dealt with anyway. And I'm not going to sympathize with the mainstream government. If there are issues they must correct. Yes, but that is besides the question of rationalization. And I think that when it comes to UCDA, there has been a thorough study which has compelled government to revisit the way the industry is being managed. And this has not meant that the farmers will not benefit even better. Because, for example, I come from the Bugishu sub-region, which the Baganda named as Bugishu. Like they named some people Badama, but there have never been people called Badama, they're Japadola. And I'm happy they changed it to Japadola. For us, we're by Masaba. And you see, in Masaba land, we grow coffee. And we have a cooperative arrangement where we do our supervision, farming support, and also marketing through the Bugishu Cooperative Union. And this does not stop us in any way from benefiting in what this government is doing. If you look at the bill itself, BCU is not affected negatively. And because even cooperative movement is under revival for those who wish to have the cooperative system revived. And as such, I don't see where the cracking of the arguments are here. Because when you see people trying to support the arguments by borrowing externally, issues that have nothing to do with the industry to make the arguments, then, there is a problem. There's a deficiency of sufficient information to support the arguments. And I would like to say that the farmers are better off under the ministry. The farmers are better off because there will be elimination of the middlemen who are hanging by the thread, waiting to jump into the queue so that they can benefit under the current arrangements. And the farmers will therefore benefit better. And also marketing. The government, through its agencies, including Foreign Affairs, do a lot of marketing for this country, including business in terms of trade and investment, which is, by the way, the Minister of Foreign Affairs tags performance on certain issues of gain for the country. Permission. If a mission is in London, you should tell us how much have you been able to attract in terms of export, in terms of investment from your mission. So this is going to be part of that. So yes, the UCDA, we shall discuss more and we realize what kind of challenges will befall UCDA on liquidation and what measures are in place, which is a transition scheme of 3 years to ensure that any shocks are accommodated and that liabilities and anything as such are settled, and how to absorb the skilled manpower that it can be requisite to enable continuity, institutional memory and continuity of the industry from the UCDA to the line ministry. So all this, you can see government is acting with a lot of skill and caution, that you don't just rush implementation of a policy change.
Thank you very much. I would like to move on to Right Honorable. Ambassador speaks of importing of certain topics that may not be necessarily useful at the end regarding just rationalization, its merits and demerits. But I think in politics, it's important to cross several disciplines. Last week, I think
what were the strange topics?
one of them I'm going to ask her. Well, last week we had a lot of we saw tribal undertones within the parliament. For purposes of our viewers, many recall, the speaker whispering something regarding the Baganda, and then we saw a lot of, I could say, groups arising or mobilizing around that, both online and physically. What do you make of this? What do the Baganda or Bagishu actually have to do with the merits and demerits of rationalization?
My brother Simon is inviting us to think normally in an abnormal country. As he discussed, I wondered whether he'd just come home. He's been away maybe 20 years since. Because what he describes is not what is obtaining in this country.
He has an artificial nation.
But you should also say what
you're
coffee...
talking about, listen, you're thinking normally in an abnormal country. Nothing moves normally in this country. And please don't invite us into talking about things that don't exist. That is what we wish would happen, for us to think rationally, to be professionals, which we are. And before we started, I was just marveling at the expertise just on this panel that is put to waste. And so you suffer, my brother, you suffer from wanting the viewers to believe that all is well. All is not well. I would want, for instance, like to look at the study that you refer to, about the study that has been done, and that should be a public document in which we understand what is the thinking behind all this, what is the plan, and because we are equally interested. And if we were in a normal government, like used to be,
when?
We would, many years ago now.
When FDC was in the power.
The memory of it is fading even. But we would have had a white paper. Do you remember such a thing?
Yes.
That word called a white paper.
Like Devonshire.
So, when you have a kangaroo administration that wakes up and does things unaudited and edited raw, not shared vision, not shared policy direction, this is where we end up. I have not lost any sleep over whether it's UCDA or Ministry of Agriculture, because it's all under the same man. Let him do what he wants, what your government wants, do it. But I have also kept wondering, what business do you have with my coffee, sir, as a government? What business do you have with my coffee, with my tea, with my sugar cane? It is because we are experiencing total state capture that is taking even, and I'm glad it's happening, and that it will reach all these sleeping fellows, sleeping citizens at home. For me, I'm glad that is happening, because you see, we have warned, forewarned, we have given policy alternatives. And we have told this country that we are walking blind into a death trap, an economic death trap, a social death trap, a political
but
death
Honorable,
trap.
government has all the business to do with your coffee.
Which one?
Supplying of seedlings,
No, sir.
marketing.
I don't want,
Supply
I don't
to
want
everyone.
their seeds.
People buy their seeds.
I don't want their
Quality.
seed.
They don't supply
I don't want
everyone.
their quality. I don't want them even to buy from me. No, sir. Go to the market and buy what you want, the best grain, and let mine float on the street. I will know how to deal with it next season. What is your business with my farm? Because it's not part of the things under your ambit. And this is where there's simply too much government all over us. I should be able to sell my coffee to Kenya at my own terms. Sell it in Brussels, take it to Singapore. Just provide a policy. I don't even know what policy would exist in a liberalized market, in a privatized market, in a private sector-led market. What business is it, government? Because it gives me nothing. This fresh air is from God. So, government has no business with any commodity except the prohibited ones. I should be able to grow my durian, grow my potatoes, and market them. Do they have a UCDA in Europe?
I think they do.
A UCDA that goes checking whether you have the right quality or what? It's the market that determines. It's the market.
European Union.
It's the market. If people want to take my coffee, they will demand for it and they'll set a price for me. That is why we disbanded Coffee Marketing Board. Simon and I were in Parliament when we were saying, listen, don't. They disbanded it for exactly the same purpose. I want to take you back in history when Oito Jog was the chairman, Coffee Marketing Board. Okay? And there was a coffee boom. That was it, 70 what?
80s.
78 around there. There was a coffee boom. Everybody was rich. There were new Peugeots, new Citroens in this country. New Honda Civic and Honda what. People were happy. Because the marketing system was being developed coming out of a colonial era. And part of the agitation for economic liberation, economic freedom, part of the negotiation for self-rule was economy. That's why Amin threw out the Indians. So that we Africans could take possession of the economy. He did it haphazardly, but that was the thinking behind that emancipation. We went into cooperatives. If you read the history of cooperatives,
Yes.
there was even a World Bank law. There was a UPC declaration in Nachivugo about cooperatives. It was to get the economy back to us. And I do recall Busoga Growers Corporation, Busoga Growers Union, Cooperative Union, was a very strong cooperative union. That cooperative union was like an IMF, a World Bank that lent money to the central government. In my lifetime,
Busoga Cooperative.
Busoga Growers Cooperative Union. And it was because it had enough money gathered amongst us Basogas, who you claim we are the poorest now. We come from very good stock, my brother. Very good stock from very rich families. But disempowered, disoriented because of policy. This zigzag policy, as Suruma called it. And so, coffee and cotton were the mainstay of our economies, and it had ready market. We developed all the Bradfords, all those big Leeds cities in the UK. It was our grandfather's effort. And I tell you that it was Idi Amin who declared an economic war. You will help me describe the details of it. An economic war for Africans, for we Ugandans as citizens, to own the economy. It was called an economic war. And so, when I look at UCDA and all these creeping threats of our economy, I can see Indians back into taking our labor, taking our sweat. I want to see the new Indians who have come to take our wealth from us by policy. Because this is robbery. Raw daylight robbery. Because you cannot tell me that we have watched the trajectory of coffee from Bireete to Rabogo, now the factory in Ntungamo. I mean, how much do they grow there?
Yeah.
You know, you nauseate us. We don't want to say certain things, but we are going to be forced to.
You say them.
I am. I went to Bushenyi and people were angered about the tea at 200
They are
shillings.
uprooting it.
But how long does it take to grow the
I
coffee?
know.
Now the milk, this milk subsector, you don't hear much about it. But also they take their milk on credit.
But how much is a little milk?
200, another 200. Now the sugar cane is 200. The best thing if they had brains, utilizing brains like Simon on a normal day. Because when Simon on a normal day is a fantastic brain. When he's not trying to make foolish points. But on a normal day, this guy here is fantastic. We would be looking at a commodities market. And that commodities market has gotten closer from London now to Dubai. We are talking about commodities. The expertise in the ministries should be about commodities, not just targeting one crop. Because we have tea, we have sugarcane. For a long time, there was a sugar policy desk in Bank of Uganda. What was it doing there? When the Basoga started growing sugarcane, then it became a policy-less thing. It is this very government that licensed the different sugar mills. And you can, if you cared to study, you will see that the Madivani family thrived on sugarcane, but the indigenous Basogas can't. What is the trap? So, what we are talking about here is not something we don't know about. We know that the government and the people in government are plotting against the rest of us. We have seen it in privatization, in liberalization. I saw how they were stripping assets of privatized entities, you know. We have seen the robbery. I was coming this morning and I looked at Nightingale again. I was sad. I mean, crooks just stole that and took it to the neighborhood here, there in Rwanda.
Yes.
So, when people get unsettled about these things, there's a history to this. And there's a policy confusion, policy zigzagging, but it is a deliberate effort to disempower certain communities. That is why the Bagandas, who are the biggest coffee farmers, and their coffee wasn't made by President Museveni yesterday. No. President Museveni and the war benefited from Buganda's energy.
He served, in his dossier, he said he served 1 million seedlings.
To who? I grew his seedlings. I cut them because they were poor quality, miserable quality.
But there's a clear increase of export quantity under the NRM.
He hasn't grown it. We have grown it as individuals. Where is his farm? They sold off all the government farms. They said government can't be involved in business. Now, individuals who are saying we are ready for business, government is again interfering. For me, I wanted to advise my colleagues. I said, listen, just take the expertise from UCDA and use it privately. Ignore these fellows. Just ignore them. Because government will not force me to sell my coffee to them. It will not.
All right. I would thank you.
It will
very much.
not.
Thank you very much, Honorable.
That's why you should be very clear in the coming campaign, in the campaign elections, to find out the ideological grounding of these parties. You know, socialism is creeping back. You know, I was privileged to be the first group that President Museveni graduated in 1987, 23rd January. And we knew him as a socialist. The entire world knew that a socialist had come round. Now, he's detour, he's going round his back to socialism again. I mean, that is not how you organize. Set up your factory if you want, yes. The people who want to sell to you at the right price can sell, but don't force us by police. Don't.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to bring in Mr. Othieno. What's your take on the rationalization before we go into our first break?
I think I'm going to get a little bit annoyed because what is at stake actually is a direct threat to our national cohesion. Simon is security familiar, is actually a threat to our national security. And our national security in the broadest sense in terms of really the direction this country goes holistically. The unfortunate thing genuinely, minus Simon's submission, is that you see Museveni and you see his followers and you see what happens in the National Assembly, and you see a speaker, who's someone supposed to be a speaker, acting as a chief whip of a group of extremists in a particular corner seeking survival, and taking a route, a direction, a tone on a subject of such a huge national importance. That you extraordinarily say, how did you get here? I will tell you guys quickly. In 1980, would have been possibly May, possibly June, July, a month or so after Bote's return from exile. He received a delegation of UPC, Buganda delegation. And so I'm told the story by the late Minister for Agriculture, Samuel Mugisa, a Muganda from Mubende. Apparently the Buganda delegation at the end of the conversation asks Dr. Bote what they should go and do, what to do. I know that UPC's projections were that they're going to get about 70 to 75 seats, parliamentary seats. This is a different topic. They ended up possibly about 72, thereabout, 72, 74. But that they were not going to get more than 2 parliamentary seats in Buganda. So UPC knew that. We ended up with 1 actually. So that was quite close. And so the conversation here. And so key strategies, including Buganda, UPC leaders knew this thing. So what do we do? Important lesson, Simon. So these guys thought about was going to tell them how to manipulate the process, how to double your campaign and make sure that you break people's necks in Luwero, go to that place in Kawempe and create falsehoods and claim that Pineti is a little Jesus. What Obote told, plus. So what Obote told the Buganda delegation was that, look, go and thank the people of Buganda, not UPCs, go and thank the people of Buganda for having been with us and fought against them, Idi Amin, managed to survive and all these things. But most importantly, point number 2, tell them to go back into production. Grow coffee. Remember, we had sabotaged coffee growth, Continue with the matoke and all your other agricultural products, Continue with your business, do your businesses. And when we come into government, of course, we expect to government, but that's what a leader says, We shall make sure that we provide you with transportation.
And there was transport.
We shall make sure that we provide you guys with this storage. And we shall make sure that we know the economy is broken. We are going to appoint a ministry for rehabilitation. Someone's brother, Masete Kwe, was actually appointed minister for rehabilitation. That's what governments do. Big project, you know. Farm supply, farm implements, agricultural implements, and all others. So that you are re-energized as an economy. And above all, we will make sure that we address the questions of prices. Meaning, therefore, that you get, you grow, you know you're going to get the market, you grow, you know you're going to get necessary monies for it. That's what governments do. And that was the leader for political party leading to the elections. I know we had early jokes about the background to this, but it's important. The founding political party, Uganda National Congress, built its foundation, which is UPC, built its foundation on the grievances of the African farmers, you know, and African average citizens, living as third-class citizens in their country. Top Bazungu, second-tier Asians, third-tier the average African. And so they campaigned around Africans' welfare generally, but also fair prices for their crops, whether it's cotton, coffee, tobacco, and others, you know, challenging the then colonial administration. Built our foundations, and that's how Uganda National Congress started as formal as a political party in 52. Fast forward to independence, what did you do? We found only 12%, you know, discussing this in different contexts, only 12% of the Africans in Uganda, Simon, in 1962, you know, contributed to the national GDP. Within 3 years, by 1965, 9th October, it was 35%. You can imagine what happened in 1965, including where Idi Amin found it in 1971, and then his sentiments about the ownership of the economy. Today, an NRA minister has got the audacity, the cheek, to go and celebrate on national television as if some kind of, you know, we've just become a nuclear power, you know, that Asians control 60% of our economy. Ironically, you young guys were not in the streets. Ironically, trade unions were mum. Ironically, political party leaders, including myself, have been shouting, but not formally in an office. We've not taken this as a country, as a serious business. I suggest this is possibly much more serious than the coffee thing, that at today, more than 60% of our economy is in the hands of Asians. Now, we know Pineti, we know Rocco, we know some dubious citizen in charge of Atiak sugar. So that means away from the Asians, you could actually argue that the remaining 40% is not in your hands. So meaning that the average Ugandans, African Ugandans, without prejudice to identity, I'll make this point, let me just make it, you know, meaning that the average Ugandan citizen sort of really is lingering around 20% of our economy. That's what at stake. But anyway, just asking something.
Yeah, no. I'm just speaking to Ambassador's point. Yeah. Well, there's an acknowledgement, and would like to get deeper into the thoughts of at the time of CA. But there's an acknowledgement that indeed there were some mistakes that were done in the 90s. And one of the reversals, as in the same vein you talk about Atiak and all of these, I think you might as well address your mind to the active work by government to put back cooperative culture.
This is not how you do cooperative. This is not how you put cooperatives back. And in any case, they could just have declared. In any case, it's criminal. I think the guys who actually created this, who killed the cooperative movement, should be in Luzira. You know, because when they carried this reform, there was no evidence that the cooperative movement was failing. The cooperative movement built the economy that took Museveni to Ntare School, to Mbara High School, to Dar es Salaam University, and even gave him a free job in President's office in 1970. That's what the power of the cooperative, that's what some of my colleagues are talking about. The power of the cooperative movements, the power of coffee and cotton across the country. That's what they did. You know, the Growers Cooperative Union. Interestingly, Salaamu is talking about the slum city of Jinja, which we made our national industrial city deliberately. You know, Jinja, Nightingale, Mbale, African Textile Mill, end products. You know, Leader Spinning Mill. But just these two, we're producing top range fabrics from cotton. Here in Bugolobi, You know, the coffee plant in Bugolobi, which is now a slum, was top. On the African continent, it was the top best, second only to one in Brazil. What happened? I can go on and go on. And just to conclude, as an introductory part, what Sarah was saying at the beginning and part of the conversation about this thing about the nonsense about the cost of mainstreaming. Of course, yes, they shouldn't have recreated these artificial things for patronage, which they were just creating jobs for other people anyway. But in any case, you cannot talk, as Sarah talks about 80 billion Uganda shillings. And Mr. Museveni cannot explain why he's given a dubious foreign company, Roko, 500 billion Uganda shillings?
There was an explanation.
Who? What is the explanation? What is the explanation?
They locked our MPs out.
I mean, governments are generally invested in bailing out major employers.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
Attack Sugar has so
I was
far
coming to that,
received
yes.
538
this is very disruptive.
billion. They have not produced even 1
This is a
kilo.
disruptive discussion.
Loboa related to
As
Pineti, I'll
you
conclude mine. Loboa related to Pineti, 400 billion Uganda shillings. It has not taken up. And Pineti is at the back of this. So basically, in conclusion, we know all that is happening is not about an incompetent government. They're very incompetent anyway. It is very much about Mr. Museveni reclaiming control of coffee, himself, his family, including his brother, that would have been trying to do. And it's not surprising that we have pulled these things, put Pineti, and what do you know? Disenfranchise a population of coffee growers, 1 in Uganda, 2 across the country.
All right. Thank you very much. Our dear viewers, we will get back to this discussion. I'd like to hear Ambassador's thoughts after other panelists have submitted in that regard. And of course, this is a very key discussion. And stick with us right here on Citizens Chat Show. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Thank you very much, our dear viewers, and welcome back to this very interesting and insightful episode of the Citizens Chat Show, where we are discussing the contentious Coffee Amendment Bill that seeks to rationalize the Coffee Development Authority and re-mainstream it with the Ministry of Agriculture, famously known as MAIF. We're also discussing coffee politics in general. I think, Mr. Ambassador, you missed that second part of the title in your earlier comments. There's also the coffee politics as part of the topic, which integrates all these aspects. But I would like to start with you and give you an opportunity, maybe to rebut, maybe to complement some of the points that were brought up by Right Honourable and also Mr. Othieno before the break.
Yes, I think sometimes as the elites of our society, we should be able to depict the true and accurate image of issues that we represent.
Yeah.
There's been a tendency of brewing a storm in a cup, and you think there's a tsunami. And which may not necessarily be there. And in the circumstance, I seem to see that. And I want to debunk the argument that there was no study, and if it were, it should have been, the output should have been a white paper, strictly. It depends on the schools people went to, that the only product of a study is a white paper, but they can be,
For government.
but it can be a report, because a white paper is just a report.
Yeah. And that's why
And
it's
I want to
called white.
attest to the viewers and listeners that there was a study, and a report was produced, and it was tabled in cabinet, and the study was based on a serious far and wide consultations, technically, scientifically, scientifically, and this report informed the position of government. And actually, the Minister of Public Service was given the responsibility of ensuring that there is a rational and scheduled approach to the implementation of the report. And this government is acting within its very well weighed decisions to do that. And I want to tell those who may wish to know as well that rationalization is not just about the Coffee Development Authority alone. There are other agencies that are being rationalized, and the schedule is very clear. So let's not narrow down this to look like we're only targeting coffee, and it is Uganda, and maybe it's Bugishu, or maybe it is Ankole. No, that's not the case. The issue is that rationalization is a broad process that is as a result of the revisiting of the performance of the earlier decisions, as I said, which we did in the 90s. And now we think that it's time to reevaluate those decisions.
Ambassador, if I may, just on that, does the issue then becomes, one was the report about coffee or in general, and two, the availability to our colleagues here to be able to inform themselves on government thinking?
Of course, yes. The issue is not just coffee. We're talking about rationalizing the agencies that were created out of the policy departures or decisions we did in the 1990s. And it's affecting a number of agencies, as outlined in the report, which can be available on demand. I mean, it's not like it's secret. It's not secret. We may not have made efforts enough to get some of this documentation
I'll
available.
permit, before you go to the...
Yes, there is a report that was done by Genocide on Rationalization. I don't know whether that's the report you're referring to as made by experts, but also, yeah, I know it can
Is it
be-
uploaded?
Yes, it's available.
Okay.
So the report is available,
Is it
and,
the one
and
you're
to
referring to?
insinuate that there was no white paper because it was not called by that name, and therefore
So what did you
there's
have
nothing in
instead?
that. It's a report.
There's a report.
You see,
Yes.
the
Right,
way
and,
government
report from who?
works.
Yes, but you're going to tell us the way government works, and you're saying the government doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why it should work.
Yes, exactly. That's how it worked.
Oh, it
Because
did work.
any documentation is done by expertise. It doesn't matter who chaired it, but what's important is that the methodology.
Now,
If the methodology was done in such a way that
Scientifically.
it was scientific, and it took into consideration the views considered necessary in the circumstances.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that the methodology was very, very rigorous, through which this report was generated.
Yes.
And it went through the required methodical structures
And it's
processes.
available to the public.
And is available.
Yes.
And even to the open media. So I don't want to be responsible for those who did not do enough to get it, because if you don't know how to press your button on your machine, or
Yes.
I don't want to take a responsibility over that. But I respect my sister. I know she will get it as and when she will, and some of the questions are responded to in that. So rationalization is broad spectrum of actions related to revisiting decisions done in the 90s and some of them in the 2000s, where we think that we must revisit certain key performance areas and see how best we can resize and reposition a government. Because these agencies belong to government. These agencies are not like, we're not private, we're not nationalizing like some UPC policies were of nationalizing private companies and taking them over for government.
Those are actually in the,
And,
those are actually in the national interest, Simon. Those in the 60s.
Exactly, so I love that.
Stop misleading.
If in the 60s, the government made a decision to take over establishments that were not for government.
No, which were foreign owned, which were foreign dubiously owned, for the record.
And these were nationalized.
Yes.
And what my colleague is describing as national interest, surely for this government is just being moderate. That one, they're maintaining their posture on liberalization. But at the same time, we want a mixed economy where the government, on one hand, enables the private sector to play its role under liberal circumstances.
Yes.
But at the same time, the key government, what we call those areas that command the heights of the economy, are brought close to the government control and supervision. This is just a normal economic gymnastic that happens in most of the civilized countries. And to me, as a businessman, I mean, at least a student of business, because I've done a number of disciplines, but one of them is business, is that it calls for business acumen to rethink and reconsider how best you can move forward upon evaluation. And this is what I argued as a point.
Yes,
The other one is to say, let's not praise actions by our previous governments that created devastation of economic performance in this country in the past. For example, the question of nationalization that was done without proper study. And I want somebody to challenge me with a product of the study that was done compared to this one.
This
Before
being
nationalization.
Like what? Which one?
Nationalization.
What was it? Yes.
Nationalization.
Rationalization report.
Nationalization.
Who were the experts?
Because if we say nationalization was the interest of government, we want to see and weigh and evaluate that decision as at that time as scholars to see whether history can blame or not.
Vis-a-vis private sector led.
Yes, yes. And then the other one is a economic war, which is earning a lot of hyped praise by some colleagues here. Economic war destroyed this country. Even if we wanted to revamp our African brothers and sisters to take charge of the economy, that's not the way to go about it. We definitely can never agree in history that what the method applied by President Idi Amin and his group was correct. Because if we ask yourself, if the performance of the economy was at a given level of GDP, what was the resultant performance thereafter? Now that the economy was handed over to the Africans.
We have a more contemporary issue with the Eritreans.
I'm not talking about Eritrea or Costa Rica. I'm just talking about
I'm saying the Eritreans in Kampala. There's that bakery, and it took me to
yes, I know. Yeah, thank you. I don't want to divert so much because that is another subject.
Yes.
The issue is you cannot be happy to be empowered as Ugandans and you squander the empowerment and you turn around to praise the action. Surely we should be mourning. We should declare a week or a month of mourning over those kind of actions. That the economy broke down. By 1976, I was in my early school and we're doing without soap, without any industrial product, and we're without any, the inflation was, the economic performance was negative. You cannot stand up and praise such an action. And in fact, if the elite stands up to do that, they should be sentenced to death by their communities. Because you lead the country into the guillotine and the death of the economy, and you have the audacity to stand and praise it. I think we don't deserve to be members of those such communities. So I just want to say, because I respect some of my colleagues, I don't want to say anything that can hurt them.
But listen, this was not praising, it was mentioning a fact in history. Don't you remember?
And I know how
that happened?
I know how the fact was mentioned. To say that Hitler brought positive change into Germany is also a fact, but also it is being said in a manner that praises Hitler, and which I'm saying is wrong. And I want to debunk those kind of arguments that economic performance was better off. I want to give you an example of liberal policies of immigration, integration of various economic, ethnic and racial players into...
Briefly, because we need to...
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I'll be brief in just 2 minutes. If you look at the US, you look at the UK, these have been melting pots of various communities immigrating to their countries and playing a significant role in an integrated economic development. And that's how they become powerful. When the Africans went to America, whether they're slaves or whatever, call them what they were, when other characters went into America, America is very different. Now it commands the global heights of economy. They have, they're bigger than 8 defense budgets in the whole world put together. America, their defense budget. So if you come back here, it's not about Indians. It's not about Langese or about Baganda or Bagishu or Banyankole. It's about what you do to bring bread to table and contribute towards the utility of the economy. So this is what we should be talking about. And that's why it's unfortunate that whatever the remark could have been about Baganda, because this is not about Uganda. In fact, we grow much bigger coffee volumes elsewhere than Uganda. And so it's not fair to say Baganda or Bagishu or Basoga because of the sugarcane which came recently and they were just following the footsteps of Madivani and doing it in a manner that they were even having Indians establish sugar factories in Basoga. But it helped. It transformed Basogas from being outgrowers entirely without any oversight to being a little more active in what was happening in the areas.
If I may,
including
I would like to bring in. If I would like to bring in Doctor.
You want to bring in Doctor? Yes. Yes. So my point is that we want to debunk the history that is not historicity, because there's a difference between history and historicity. Historicity is about factual facts, but history is any hearsay and whatever people can say. It was, even if it wasn't. And two, that rationalization is a broad approach that is reconsidering the policies and performance of those actions that were done in the past, and now we think there is need to revisit them.
All right, thank you very much. And on that same note, I would like to ask Dr. Bireete, what's wrong with a government, NRM government, that has won the mandate of the people in a legitimate election, reevaluating its own actions, over time and time, as long as they have the mandate of the people? Isn't it healthy business practice to keep checking, and maybe in 10 years they have to again form these agencies? But what's wrong with the evaluation as a method of governance?
Well, the tagline you're using is problematic. As a civic actor and election observer, I cannot authoritatively say that the NRM won the mandate of the people. I cannot. Why? Because of the opaqueness in the election exercise, the lack of transparency, and you can see even the manner in which they are going to redo even the next election. If President Museveni is on the ballot, even now a child can tell you that he will win with about 53%. Even a child, 1 year to elections, can tell you that if President Museveni is on the ballot, he will get about 53%. That's how bad our situation is. So I don't want to go into those questions.
But the question was put to you.
No. I'm saying that I cannot say.
But you cannot set your own question. Because the moderator has put you.
Can you leave the moderator to moderate?
Please.
He has moderated you to answer his question.
He was the one saying people are interrupted. And
He
he's
was
now the
disturbing
champion
you.
of disruption.
Yes,
So
please.
I cannot authoritatively comment on legitimacy issues. Having said that, I want to say 3 things in line with the Ambassador Mulongo's submission. When you find that you need so many, essays to explain a simple issue in politics, then there's a problem. The challenges of the day are not going to be solved by long speeches.
Maybe it's being scientific.
No, I'm coming. And I want to point on 3 things. One, he mentioned in his first submission the comfort that Bamasaba enjoy.
Yes.
Because their cooperative movement was not disrupted by the politics of the day. Like Banyankole Kweterana, which has failed even to be revived because of the politics mixed with ethnicity in Western Uganda. So yes, the Bamasaba might not be affected, whether UCDA is there or whether it's the ministry that they are dealing with, because your region is intact with the cooperative movement taking care of farmers' concerns. But we need to think beyond our own comfort and look at a farmer in Western Uganda where we have now private cooperatives. I don't know how they are even working. Those farmers who need to deal with UCDA, can you let them be? What is the principle in rationalization, or the report you're mentioning, by operational wealth creation, which I've read? I think if you go to the website of operational wealth creation, you will find that rationalization report. I've read it. That report, the principles, objectives of rationalizations were: one, stop duplication. What is UCDA duplicating? Does it qualify in that line? No. Stop wastage. Wastage underlined by duplication. Which other department is managing coffee? There is no duplication. So there is no wastage in that line. 3, improve efficiency. The Minister of Agriculture, from the time of Varedam's saga, and by then I think the two honorables were in Parliament. From the time of Varedam's saga, the Ministry of Agriculture in Uganda has never successfully implemented any single project. Even when they are told to procure tractors, they procure dead tractors. Read the reports before Public Accounts Committee by Auditor General. No single successful project in the ministry.
What about those insects? What are they called?
The locusts.
The locusts.
The locusts, where they were saying they want to buy stones for throwing, 90 billion for stones for throwing at locusts. Really?
Were they manufactured by NRM?
Oh God, that one of them came as an intelligence officer, went back and informed others that
it's problematic here, don't come. So there is no single successful project under this ministry. We have had sugar crisis in Busoga. We have the tea crisis in Ankole and Fort Poto. We have
the foot and mouth.
Foot and mouth disease.
Wrong vaccines. What? All sorts
you
of
know.
things.
But doesn't it now put the limelight on them to perform?
No, but why put an efficient entity where there is no duplication, where there is no wastage,
I mean,
to a death trap that you want to push something also there to die? That's what they are signing up to. There is no successful project under the
There's an argument around not duplication but necessity, given the direction.
What is the necessity? Let me tell you, we have 2 agencies in this country that spend above 2 billion per day on average. We have Parliament that spends 2.5 billion on average per day. We have State House that spends 2.8 billion per day. And you are struggling to strong an institution that spends 85 billion per year, bringing the highest forex in the country. Are you making sense? Is it believable? Anyway.
There's an argument that should we then have an agency for piggery, for milk, for
No.
all these other things?
Let the
Have
so-called
nothing.
have nothing. Actually, it's better even to have nothing.
Then that is naive.
Let me tell you, when you have an incompetent government, it's better to leave people on their own. What we are saying
Nothing works.
Leave this UCDA, struggle with the rest under the ministry. Don't create UCDA as a pig, those scientific projects.
The guinea pig.
The guinea pig example that you want to build on it. Create a success story for a failing ministry. Generate failures since the saga of Valley Dams. So really, what are we dealing with? So we need also, my last point as we conclude, we need to see who are the companies that benefit most from Uganda's coffee exports. All of them are foreign.
Yes.
And I'm going to read. I know that there is Chagaranyi coffee, which people...
Chagulanyi coffee.
No, it's Chagaranyi.
Chagalanyi.
People confuse it as Chagaranyi because of a local name.
Oh, yeah, Chagalanyi.
And it's owned by British and Indians.
Apparently, yes.
Chagaranyi coffee, Foreign.
In Mbali.
It controls 10.1%.
Yes, it is in Mali.
Yes.
10.21%. You have Olam Uganda. Foreign.
Yes.
8.64%. Kawakom, 7.86%. Ibero, I think it's also in Bugisu. But foreign, all of them, 7.33%.
And BC.
Tauton, 7.18%.
BC doesn't
Lois
feature on the
Dreyfus,
These
6.81%.
famous things you tell us.
Export trading, 6.45%.
And
Ideal
resource.
quality, 5.69%. Yugakov, 5.57%. And then Bismarck Coffee, 4%. All these are foreign companies and they control 85% of the coffee income in the country. These are things, if we were interested in productivity of the people, these are things that we should be interrogating. And as I conclude, I want to request Simon, Honorable Mulongo, when he comes back, to tell us any single productivity that the NRM has promoted consistently. They came with Arabica coffee, then caused the uprooting of Robusta coffee, then went to Coron coffee, then went to vanilla, then went to silk farming, then I don't know what, poultry. There is no crop that they can promote for 5 years consistently and encourage productivity and fight poverty amongst the people. It is not there.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to bring in Right Honorable Salaamu Musumba. A lot has been said about the NRM, but what is the policy of FDC, around coffee, or at least its guiding principles on
Well, for us, we are a center-right party, meaning that minimum government intervention, minimum. Leave the market, set the standard, and let the market forces work. Call us capitalists. That's what we believe in. And that's what we promote. We believe in low taxes. Low taxes. This 18% VAT, no, take 6%. So that we leave enough disposable income to the population to thrive. Yeah. You want more?
Yes.
That's enough. That's enough, because we want you to take home and live well, not live in the future. No, not even live in the past like we've been compelled to. Because we compare everything about ourselves with the glorious past. There's no other country or other continent that glorifies the past like we do, because life has never been better. Technology, knowledge, everything. But for us, the quantum of quality of life was better before for many people. That's why there's this sentimental attachment to coffee. Coffee made us. And so, if coffee made us, what else do you want? What more have you provided for? You've talked about oil for years. You have even given oil roads. You have given concessions. You've done, there's simply too much policy confusion. There are oil roads in Hoima. And there are no export roads in eastern Uganda. The Jinja-Kampala Express Highway.
Oh dear.
I mean, you don't know how bad that road is, because maybe you've never even had a reason to go there. But that's the economic lifeline of this country, because we do not have waterways, we don't have trains for haulage, we have just a track, 2 lanes since independence, 2. So, really, telling us about new things, coffee, as we are talking about, coffee is sentimental, because that has been the lifeline. When communities have been failed with education, with health, they've fallen back on their coffee.
So the gymnastic should be between liberal, individual farmers and
the
cooperatives.
Market. And the market.
Where does
whether that
cooperatives
market
fit
is
in?
cooperatives, whether that market is Kenya, whether that market is Olaamu or anything, I should be able to sell at the market price. But the middlemen that are being imposed on us, I do remember, I think I was about in high school, when Oito was made the chairman of Coffee Marketing Board. You know? The uproar was palpable up to the sky that, listen, you're taking away our livelihoods. Because why should Oito be the one to take away, to scoop away the cream of our energy, our soil, our toil? And I see us going back that way. Young men and young women take interest in knowing where we've come from, how we've come, the journey of the coffee economy in this country. So that you don't listen just to the hype of all these things.
And then before I move to Mr. Othieno, I also wanted to ask, you had hinted on some of the discussions around the banning of the disintegration of the Coffee Marketing Board in the CA. What was going on exactly? It wasn't
the CA, it was the 6th Parliament, and I think about the 7th Parliament, at the height of privatization and liberalization. And if you read the Hansard, because everything is on record, you will find that there were people who were very, very knowledgeable about marketing boards as the way of helping farmers who had little knowledge about the international market. Now we know a lot about the international market. We have these funds and all those. But then they were not. So government needed to organize the marketing infrastructure to help the raw material get to the markets with help. The government then had a different responsibility. And so Coffee Marketing Board, they bought warehouses in Mombasa. We had the train. And we had the quality assurance at the gyms, at the ginneries. We had Coffee Marketing Board. We had a coffee factory in Namlesa for Soga Growers Cooperative. The most efficient on the continent.
So how did such a meritable entity
policy
lose out?
Policy in that, first of all, because the war had used coffee, had stolen coffee from farmers, impoverished the farmers, to hold through transition, to hold strong the new arrivals of 86. They needed time, and what was playing in the time was not to reconstruct quickly. To allow it and go with it. It took a long time to get things straight. Even when they were talking about compensation, at that time I was the chair of the Committee on Presidential and Foreign Affairs, and they were talking about compensating people in Luwero. The list never ever came out. Years and years and years. For the 10 years I was in Parliament, there was never a comprehensive list of the people being compensated. Also, the people that needed to be compensated were Uganda, people who lost the Owiniki bulls. Those were transport companies. The Nyankole Kweterana. You can see the years it has taken for people to be compensated and compensated in such a thieving way. Nothing structured. So the government of NRA and NRM then could not pay for, could not compensate the things they had destroyed during the war. So they did understand that the coffee was the provider of war funds, the war chest. I know that they did understand what coffee meant because they sold coffee.
So,
I hear
how does
stories
that
from
relate to
Dr.
the marketing board?
Well, part of the plot, because then the guys that had the expertise were from the previous government. This new government hadn't created the expertise and the competence to do anything. And at that time, I do remember people like the Honorable Ojok Bileo and others would tell us that this government is stuck in the phase of trial and error. So they finished the stage of trial. They tried the butter, they tried this. Now they are on error, making errors, series of errors. As you can see, we are continuing with the errors.
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to bring in Mr. Sheno also on the same question, because I think it's a key policy question for political parties. How would the UPC government orchestrate this gymnastics around coffee?
Of course, we did everything that this bunch broke. But I think what is important is that to say that NRA has been a fraud from the beginning. NRA has been a fraud since December 10th, 11th, 1980, when they did a good job spreading across as UPM to have candidates across the country. And just about Crispus Kionga managed to win a parliamentary seat. Looking at the results, which now is doing the rounds, actually I thought Kionga won much more decisively. But it was a close run with the UPC candidate and also somebody from DP. And beyond that, Mr. Museveni also came a close third, but he was close to UPC candidate at the time, but Sam Kutesa just about won. And so to their credit, they put out more candidates than actually I'd always thought when I looked through the lists across the country. But beyond that, they're fraud. They lost elections. Instead of going back to the drawing board, that was political parties, asking about political parties as a new political organization, they had apparently put this politics thing. So they have no clue on political policy. The idea was to militarily capture the Republic of Uganda, work with neighboring countries, including the governments of Rwanda, use Uganda as a base, thieve whatever they can thieve from Ginger, and some of it take to Rwanda, or take to wherever it's convenient for them to keep them in power in the last 40 years. That's what they've done. And I can tell you it's something massively criminal. But that said, it's interesting what Salam is talking about from a policy perspective. I happen to represent a center-left political party, Uganda People's Congress. So we quite clearly believe in big government, and we believe at the same time in enabling communities to actively, constructively engage. But a center-left...
Does big government include nationalization, as you were?
That's what Simon was saying. You sort of interrupt, and you're a lawyer, so you should actually expect somebody to give a brief contextual introduction to that. So what you do, what big governments do in democracies and responsible governments, to create enabling environments. It's not this slogan about socialism the way America sells Cuba. That anyone who's socialist, basically, they're terrible, they'll take away everything, you cannot afford a tie unless government gives you, which is basically an absolute nonsense, So you create an enabling environment in which, private individuals can thrive side by side, with the state and others. In other words, you cushion the weak, you go to Karamoja and create enabling environments, including for a private enterprise to operate. But you put a ceiling where you talk about the European Union. By the European Union is generally very socialistic agency, where you put cushions for regulation. Say, look, if you're going to import from Argentina, you must make sure that our farmers and our consumers are not exploited. Those are roles of government, But also, if there are thriving guys like the young you guys who want to go to mini Silicon Valleys in Europe, you can go ahead and create your Facebook and others and thrive and become billionaires like a very respected Richard Branson in UK. And it's absolutely fine. He's actually one of the most liked multi-billionaires. So you can be a billionaire successfully doing whatever so that we pay your taxes. But the slight difference in taxes, and it's important, is that differentially, you believe that the people who earn slightly more should pay slightly more relatively, and that out of your taxes, you don't feed a bunch whose convoy is 100 vehicles in the streets of Kampala. Out of your taxes, you invest that to cushion the weakest of the weak in Karamoja. So you don't steal their mabati, but you invest in education, you invest in the health, invest in infrastructure. And in Karamoja, you make sure there's a Proscovia line that instead of coming from Iganga Street, there's one that goes towards Kamuli. And Proscovia is enabled because you'll pick up coffee and cotton, but at the same time, that people will be able to travel from Kamuli to come and join me in Media so that we're together and we study. And then after that, we enable a big Uganda as a nation state that was to do. So ideologically, that's that. You take us back, as I said, the early part of our independence. We say progressive left, say enabling communities. By the way, African independence predominantly was backed by the progressive left in Europe and North America, you don't believe in exploitation for others. You know, you believe in ending slavery. You believe in let the colonies govern themselves. You know, so if you let the colonies govern themselves, you don't want to go to Acholi, you know, which is ravaged by the war that you created. You know, and then you're going to take your crude cattle there and take away their land. You see that the Acholi is a post-conflict area. What do we go as a government going to do? You go and provide them with seeds, but not to boast. That's progressive left governments do that. So actually you realize you want to put much more health services, much more education services, including what a UPC government would do, would create an education fund to make sure that we're, you know, girl children or children from the north or post-conflict environments, make sure that they never pay school fees for the next 20 years. You want to level up community because education is the number one equalizer. Think it from that perspective. But really back to this, I think what is at stake is the fact that we are a government by experiment, and we are in a situation in which, I think as Sarah says, you come and find something working and you break it. But you clearly break it because you want to enrich yourself because you came from the bush with one slippers. You know? Now you want to make sure that you've got trails of vehicles. So you sell everything that UPC built for the citizens of this country, you know, sell it not to government, the private sector, but you sell them to quite clearly yourselves. Because an average private individual, including Salaamu, you know, in Ginger, may never be invited to the high table to say there's an opportunity to sell a public building here in Nakasero, but they will take it over for ourselves. You know, so that's basically what these guys did for themselves. But a quick thing on what Simon was saying on nationalization. I think it's misleading, and it's true that a nationalization in 1970 did occur. It's one of the most impressive things, and for you, I know you liked Semakade, meaning open progressive, and by the way, I supported it. Decolonize. You know what I'm saying? You must support UPC and revisit our programs. And if you do, you'll see how you want to encourage NRA to be taken to prison. What we did in 1970, we were to say that, look, after 70 years, the British sacked everything from Uganda, sacked everything from Congo, and then went and built Brussels and London, you know? Now we are an independent national economy. We are saying that some of these Barclays who are crudely taking away our monies and profits, you know? In 1965, we founded Uganda Commercial Bank within 3 years of independence. That's what progressive governments do, you know? They've sold it to Stanbic. So basically, the shareholders, you know, don't belong to Uganda. But Ugandan kids are slaving for them at the tills every day. But you see, look, these Barclays here, who were built at the back of slavery, our children, African children, because that's what the left does. Context with this conversation, I like this, you know? We will make sure that government takes majority shares. That's what Simon, I hope this will get. It takes majority shares.
Majority shares.
And it was negotiated with the lawyers from Kampala. Hey, Obote, I love you, man. Lawyers from Kampala and lawyers from London. You know? And you agree to agree. This happens everywhere in the world. You know?
International business.
Yes. And then you do that, and then you get appropriate compensation. And you take transitional, you agree transitional period and everything else. And compensation and everything. That's what happened. So government took majority shares on key strategic, UPC. Strategic national sectors in banking, in industry, et al. That's what we did to give this to Ugandans. And we did.
90.
That's what I did, 1970. You know?
Uganda Hotel.
You know? So,
By the way, Uganda Hotels, I was impressed to learn that Sheraton still has holdings of Busoga Cooperative Union, Ugisi Cooperative Union, and that's why they have not been able to completely take it over.
And if you searched for Busoga Growers Cooperative Union.
Yeah, but the question is, have they been paying these unions their dividends?
you know, and those are the details we need to have because Ugandans are being short-changed. And it's very important because we will have a Uganda post-7. Then finally on the Oyeto Joe Coffee thing, which was basically propaganda, and Salaamu was not taking it from that perspective, but based on the available information. I was privileged to have a one-to-one conversation with Milton, and he's written it actually, we have it in writing, where he said, remember, and that's why we said, even Idi Amin, one of the things we're trying to do is to to rehabilitate him while we're rehabilitating our contextual history to build Uganda for yourselves going forward. And it was this that we recognized that immediately from 1971, we started undermining Amin's government. So what you do, and for somebody like me, who's undermined and continues to undermine era, particularly was to basically to sabotage them. So basically, undermine the coffee industry because we are trying to make sure that we denied him forex, to succeed as a regime. So we did that. The Musevenis did, all of us, we did that as a matter of many policy. And then as the economy was collapsing, and the industry was falling and dropping. So Kenya did the boom, the Chepkube that my brother's talking about. So coffee smuggling.
What is
smuggling?
It's a market. So the coffee industry in Uganda under Amin collapsed, in part because of the incompetence, but in part because of our sabotage.
And sanctions.
And indeed sanctions. So in 1979...
But we sold for a good price, didn't we?
Indeed. But 1979, which is an important point, smuggling was at its peak. And normally smuggling, like mafia, you take check for it becomes a very militarized thing. So Obote said that in between the transitional period between 79 and 80, 1.5 years, the Musevenis and the entire bunch who had come home, had all of themselves also got involved in the coffee thing. People making quick money. So Obote said he had to think deeply, knowing the integrity of Oito Joke, and knowing that he was an army officer on the basis of these operations. He became the chairman. Now, becoming chairman doesn't mean he owned the organization. Coffee Marketing Board. So he became chairman. He appointed him chairman of Coffee Marketing Board, meaning giving me the teeth. He had the capacity.
Coffee Marketing Board.
Oh.
The teeth and capacity to, and that's the argument, the teeth to be able to check smuggling and protect this key aspect of our economy, Simon, that we knew we needed to rehabilitate our economy post-Idi Amin. And that was the whole thing.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to bring in Ambassador, firstly to answer Dr. Bireete's question about the issue of consistency. I think it was reiterated somewhere that there was an error. It seems to be a constant cycle of trial and error, and now error and error and error. How do you rebut or answer to that? And maybe any other remarks?
Try and
you need as much time as you can, so we'll give you that allocation.
In philosophy, there are issues to do with the jargonizing. You create a jargon, and you want people to write on it as if it is a fact. And this is what I think some of my colleagues are trying to insinuate. The interim government has been consistent in many ways.
In its inconsistency.
This consistency, whether it's if you look at the American Constitution, that has survived for over 250 years, it has been consistent in terms of the laws related to its amendment. But that doesn't mean it has not been amended. But the consistency is such that it goes through the rigors necessary for it to be changed or some clauses. That doesn't mean that there is anarchy in terms of managing the revisions of the Constitution. The NRM's government consistency includes this freedom of speech and conscience. And we are here since 1986 as part of the postulates of the NRM's new government to say we must guarantee the freedom of conscience and expression. And I'm happy that we're here to speak freely. And that consistency has never changed. That doesn't mean there haven't been issues related to accusations of a case here and there, which I admit it's possible it's there or it is there. But the consistency in terms of broad principle and practice is the issue of a private sector led. Actually, the business in this country is predominantly handled by the private sector. And we know that the government is a poor businessman. And as such, even if we do the rationalization, government will not do the business per se. It will be handled by those agencies that we believe will do it from the private sector. The regulation still remains with the government. And the so-called central leftists. You see, definitions of that nature are fluid, because even Obore was a central leftist, and he was trying to swing much more to the left than even the center. And I never see him practice that. Neither in neither the Common Man's Charter and Akivubo Declaration, neither did he practice it when he came back in 1980. So there is no I can attribute to UPC of any successful policy in that regard of being leftist, because where is the leftist in Obote 1 or 2? The only main policy that we see that happened was a tendency to republicanism, but which has ushered in the anarchy in this country from 1966. That's the only policy that we know, the pigeonhole constitution. That's the only thing that we remember in the history of this country that left us in agony up to now. For us, the consistency has been that if we say the kingdoms can actually operate as and when the people want them, it's been consistent since 1993, and that is consistent enough. And on crop and also, of course, crop productivity and all that. Yes, there have been some challenges. It is true there have been ups and downs on that, but on the whole, the consistency for having the spirit to help and support the farmers remains really in place. So, and now I want to bring in the external factors, that even if the NRM government has been willing to do so much, the regulation of the world market, the forces at world market, are not hinged on pure demand and supply forces. The regulation is by the quotas that are allotted to various countries. And as such, even the growth of coffee, there's a limit to it at the world market, how much more coffee we can sell. So that limits our capacity in a way. There are those things that have worked, others have failed, but policy performance worldwide, whether it is in Russia or Argentina or South Africa, those kind of ups and downs happen. And I want to admit that there have been challenges, but perhaps more exogenous than endogenous, because what we do as a market outside Uganda is not entirely in our control. I want to revisit the sources of our citation. I saw my sister quoting a list of companies, and which companies are not necessarily entirely in which she quoted. I have prominent coffee exporters in Uganda. It is true that a bigger number is foreign, and the dynamics surrounding it can be explained.
So what's the point?
The point is that Chagalanyi, for example, was founded by Dr. Paul Mugambwa. And
Chagalanyi.
Yes, Dr. Paul Mugambwa is the founder of Chagalanyi. And because of partnership issues, you have some foreigners partnering with Ugandans to do business. And business acumen is such that as long as the economic sense takes its day, for you to bring in more resources to inject into this, to me, I have no problem with that. Because what the purpose of us, because Ugandanizing, you see this argument that it must be by Uganda, Ugandan. But you're not looking at the limits of your capacity in terms of investment levels. If somebody can bring in resources, additional resources, it is only prudent that you allow it to drive your performance better. So to me, Chagalanyi is one of them. Ugakov leads as a local company by 13.8. Chagalanyi is 12%. Kawakom, Uganda, is 6%, and Great Lakes Coffee is 4%. I know that these other ones like Sukafina, Teton, Olam International, Bernhard Rothfuss, and Louis Dreyfus Company, and Eurocaf. These are predominantly foreign. But this is also part of our liberalism of the economy, that we allow players.
Is that another consistency?
Yes. Once we liberalize, when you liberalize the economy and allow competition, you don't again bring in ethnicization of the industry to say, oh, coffee is liberalized, but it must be by a Ugandan. Then, to me, That is not liberalism
I
at
see
all.
our colleague from the
Yes,
center,
yes, yes, because
very happy. With the,
you know,
the labels of
when
liberalism.
you are at a soccer stadium, you are at a soccer stadium, and people are playing football, the spectators tend to play better than the people playing in the stadium. And I can see some colleagues who have not been in the government performing better than the government, and I have no problem with it, because they're supposed to offer that criticism that is very constructive, and we take. And I can tell you that even this discussion, a number of points being raised here have to be taken into consideration by government, particularly if they add value. But if they're being just for the sake of showcasing, then of course that's unfortunate. I want to say the consistency. The evidence of consistency is on performance output. The economy of this country has grown in heaps and bounds. And the level of our GDP has grown tens and tenfold since 1986. The issue of export performance in a number of tens and folds. If at all the scientific argument being raised by my colleagues would be actually growing backwards and maintaining those low levels in which we inherited the economy in 1986, when actually it was in total recession. The growth rates had become actually negative. There was virtually anything happening in the country. So we should be able to give credit where it is due. For example,
Ambassador, we have to conclude.
of course I was alive.
Technical
And
team
I want to say that yes, Dr. Bote did a lot, but he took over an operating economy. The economy that was having the 3 T's and whose exports were very firm. But by the time he left, the 3 T's had dwindled to less than 1 T performing. Yes, but we just want to say they're flagging, but this is the point to state that yes, Dr. Bote did contribute hugely to this country, but also there are merits, and the merits we should be able to talk about, and those are some of them.
All right. I'd like to give each of you a minute just to conclude. I will start with Dr. Bireete and then...
And we flow this way.
Yes.
Why didn't you start from that side to be fair?
No. I started that.
It's the moderators.
Well, I think for me, the coffee debate is a debate that should be taken to the people. It would be good if these matters were determined in a referendum. We know how our government works. There's trust from majority Ugandans. We know how the parliament does its work. They are like voting machines, and it's no wonder that words flipped from the speakers, microphone. And what the speaker said is not something to be taken lightly. My own opinion is that it was a reflex leak from what she had been told to do. I have a feeling it wasn't her own thinking, but it was a reflex leakage from a conversation she had had with her bosses. Make sure the Ugandas don't get to those numbers. It's very,
where were you?
It's very unfortunate.
I hear you.
Very, very unfortunate. I hope she will disqualify herself from chairing deliberations regarding this bill, because she no longer qualifies. So, but also going forward, take this debate to the people. We have seen all machinations to tamper with coffee. First is Bireete. What was Bireete about? That you get level 18, the best seeds, and you create monopoly around them. So how can we trust you that you now mean well this time round? Where was this wellness and good intentions when you created Bireete and that fake agreement? Why should we trust? So for me, citizens, look, this is your economy. There are so many things going against us. We are struggling. We are on our own. Government is never there to pick your bills. All they do is add tax to your bills and economic burdens. Let's wake up.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Bireete. Ambassador Mulongo.
My take is really simple. That we run the country in accordance with the law, in accordance with established policy and its practice. The institution of parliament should be respected because parliament under the law has been given mandate to do the discussion and promulgation of laws and passing of laws, including policies, whether on finance or otherwise. And I think that whether the speaker did say what is attributed to her or not, she is not members of parliament. Hers is to preside over. It is the members of parliament who decide. Suggestions to do with plebiscites, that we should go to a referendum, sounds very attractive, but depends on whether it falls within the paradigm of necessitating a referendum.
Yes.
Because I also know how many geographical areas grow coffee in this country. There are huge areas of this country, more than 2/3, that don't actually grow coffee. So if you think that can become a national issue for a referendum, then we need to make the arguments more scientific and much better. Otherwise, the suggestions could be coming from the blue for different reasons other than what we really place this country in terms of whether we can have a referendum on a matter or not. So I want to suggest that Parliament continues to play a significant role. Consultations with the people is very important, especially coffee growing areas, involving them, and also assuring those benefits that were emanating from UCDA should not be lost.
Yes.
Like skills and other gains should not be lost, even if with these proposed changes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for joining us today.
Mine is to remind all of you, viewers and listeners, and all citizens, to understand that politics is economics. Yeah. Politics is economics. To determine your political, your economic destiny, you must get the politics that aligns with that destiny. And coffee is a true representative of the mismatch of interests. State capture, economic capture, total capture of your labor, of your economy, of your household. So, I believe that war has been declared on every household and its economy, and it's up to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank me later.
Yes. We'll thank you some now and later also. Yes, and Mr. Othieno, as we conclude the show.
I just want to say quickly that in 1987, as part of Museveni's new push for his new phase from socialist extremist in Lowero bushes, if that was true, of course it wasn't, to the new darling and agent of excess imperialism in this country and in our region, together with then IMF and World Bank and some of their friends around whom I will not go to names, they went in the beginning for the job of so-called liberalization. One of the things that Museveni did quite criminally was to move Uganda's shilling, then pegged at 12 Uganda shillings. Can you imagine 12 Uganda shillings under this regime to the dollar? They broke UPC's billed Uganda shilling, 12 shillings per dollar, to 60 shillings per dollar. Now you do that overnight. I don't know how much, and you need to go and carry and research, how much the price of coffee was increased the following day, or how much wages, whether there was any wages which are double. That was the beginning of the formal breakup of the economic well-being of the citizens as presented by my system. That is something that we are taking lightly, and you know, later that year, you know what Mr. Museveni did? He went ahead and killed, you get 1,000 shillings, he knocks off 2 zeros, you end up with 10 shillings and takes 30%, allegedly to pay for this war thing that Salaamu was talking about. And we don't know where the 30% of the current conversion money has gone. That is a continued theft, the kind of things that we need to investigate. So it has really been that. And so therefore it's not surprising that the coffee debate comes, a suspicion from the citizenry. And my good sister Anita, who should really be the mere presiding officer in the National Assembly, becomes the enforcer on behalf of NRA, a job she should really have left to young Samson Obua as the chief whip. And in any case, even if it was left for Samson Obua, what Anita said, and it's almost certainly true, is something which should be a sackable offense. But as a speaker, of course, really the most decent thing she ought to have done is to resign.
Yes.
And in any case, she's not possibly not going to resign. Sarah makes an interesting point that maybe she should recuse herself from future debates in relation to this. But whatever the case, it's a huge amount of damage done. And the irony is, referring this to the Baganda as an identity, our largest identity in this country, and an identity, a group that Mr. Museveni and his friends managed to persuade to break up the elected UPC government. I find it both ironical, sad, but on behalf of the people of Uganda, it is extremely painfully sadful thing, because as I said, I don't know where we're going to go with this kind of amount of hate by a regime that came on the back of hate, and 40 years later, it's not doing anything more. So like Salam said,
thank you.
Ugandans need to wake up and we begin to have a much more urgent national conversation to see what kind of Uganda we will have on behalf of the future of this country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Othieno, and to all our dear panelists today for really breaking down this issue around the Coffee Amendment Bill, but also the politics of coffee, which I think is really important, especially as the conversation sieves into the wider public and the citizenry in the light of the deliberations in Parliament. It was a great pleasure hosting the show today. I also learned a lot, and I hope we keep these conversations going, as we always say, working together on this journey of building our nation state, Uganda. Thank you very much, and until next time, I remain Okot Olaa, your host for today.